seated.
Good morning, Judge.
Okay, we are ready to proceed today with opening statements. Are there any matters that need to be addressed before we proceed with the opening statements?
Judge, there's just one thing. I discussed this with other defense counsel this morning, and we want to know if this is agreeable to you. In the event I go over my estimated time by 5 or 10 minutes, if other defense counsel cede an equivalent amount of time, there's no difference in the time spent. Would that be agreeable to the court?
Okay. Well, let's see what we had yesterday.
We have 2 or 3 defense counsel who are in a position to do that.
Make it 4.
4.
Well, who is going to surrender their time?
If Mr. Jacobs sees 5 minutes of my time, he can certainly have it, Judge.
Well, how much was your time? Was 20 minutes, wasn't it?
Yes. I expect I'll be at the end of the day, and the jury would be quite tired of hearing the lawyers speak by that time.
So, Mr. Jacobs, you indicated 40 minutes.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanawida, you indicated 15 to 20.
No, 20 to 25, I think. Well, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Mr. Hessenecker had 30 minutes.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Ms. Grasso had 20 to 30.
That's correct. I can make it 25, Your Honor.
Okay. And then Mr. Pagano. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Warren had, his one's 15.
Yeah, I'll happily give 5 minutes to Mr. Jacobs.
Mr. Pagano, you had 30.
I'd say about 30 minutes, give or take 5 minutes.
Well, this will be 30. And then, let's see, Mr. O'Connor had 15.
And I'd be happy to see.
Okay, so you want only 10?
Indeed.
Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. Fine. So, Mr. Jacobs will have up to 15 minutes.
Thank you, Judge.
So what we will do is we will go with the government first, 75 minutes. We will take a break, and then likely that we get then Mr. Jacobs and Mrs. Sanawida before lunch. And then we'll break for lunch. We'll have the rest of them this afternoon if that becomes necessary. Okay, we're ready to go. The only other item of business is all of the jurors appeared as scheduled, so the 2 alternates or substitute alternates will be dismissed. Any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, very well. So, Mr. Vance, would you dismiss the substitute alternates and bring the jury in?
And then we sat through it a couple times, too.
Me? The long one in this.
Oops.
Ready, Eddie? Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some things to say. Give me a minute.
I want you to look at that cartridge casing for inspiration.
Now, Scoops, I did explain to you that generally we blame all this stuff on the North Jersey guys.
Yeah, sure.
I did mention that, didn't I?
I'll beat the drum.
Nothing personal.
And Beeps, don't forget Beeps.
Right? Beeps.
Frenchie, always blame the dead guy. Rule number one.
Excited? Yeah, he died.
Scoops, you excited? You haven't seen
Yeah.
in a long time.
Let's see, answer to your question, Danny.
All rise for the court.
Good morning. Please be seated. Thank you for your prompt attendance here this morning. As you know, we're going to be spending a little time together. So before we begin, we're going to swear you in, and I'm going to give you then some instructions and tell you what the program is for today. So, Mr. Vance, would you please swear the panel?
Jurors, please rise and raise your right hands. You do swear that you will well and truly try the issues joined in indictment number 09496 between the United States of America, Joseph Legambi, Anthony Staino, Joseph Massimino, George Borghese, Damien Canalicchio, Gary Battaglini, and Joseph Licata, and that you will render a true verdict according to the evidence. So help you God, or you do so affirm.
Okay, please be seated. Now that you have been sworn, I will give you some preliminary instructions to guide you in your participation in the trial. First, let me just remind you that this is an important duty that you have undertaken here. And you are a link in the chain of the administration of justice. And as jurors, what you're about to do traces its roots back more than 1,000 years into Northern Europe. And although the jury has changed in form over the years, the function remains the same. It calls upon members of the community to come forth and deliberate together and pass judgment on the conduct of other members of that community, whether it is in a criminal context, such as this case, or in a civil context. Our tradition is to have those important judgments be rendered by community members. So that's what you're called upon to do here, to do justice under law. And it is an important function. The government, the defendants, and I all place our confidence in your ability to perform this duty seriously, to pay attention to the evidence, and to render a verdict based upon the facts that have been established in this courtroom and the law that I will give you. It will be your duty to find from the evidence what the facts are, and you alone will be the judges of the facts. You will then have to apply to those facts the court as I give you that law. And as we discussed during the process of jury selection, you must follow the law whether you agree with it or not for purposes of this trial. And nothing that I may say or do during the course of this trial, or nothing that I may have said or done so far, is intended to indicate or should be taken by you as any indication of what your verdict should be. Your verdict is your function alone and not mine. The evidence from which you will find the facts will consist of the testimony of witnesses and documents and other things received into the record as exhibits, and any facts that the lawyers agree to or stipulate to and that I instruct you to so find. Certain things, however, are not evidence and must not be considered by you. Statements and arguments and questions by the lawyers, that is not evidence in the case. Objections to questions also are not evidence in the case. Lawyers have an obligation to their clients to make objections when they believe that the evidence is being offered for an improper purpose under the rules of evidence. It is not that anyone is attempting to hide anything from you, but it is that under the rules of evidence, particular types of evidence are not permitted. Therefore, you should not be influenced by the objections or by my ruling on those objections. If the objection is sustained, ignore the question. If it is overruled, treat the answer like any other answer. And if you're instructed that some item of evidence is received for a limited purpose, you must follow that instruction. And testimony that the court has excluded or told you to disregard is not evidence and must not be considered by you. And anything that you may have seen or heard outside the courtroom is not evidence and must be disregarded. You are to decide the case solely on the evidence presented here in the courtroom. Now, there's two kinds of evidence. There's direct evidence and there is circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence is the direct proof of a fact, such as testimony of an eyewitness. Circumstantial evidence is proof of facts from which you may infer or conclude that other facts exist. And I will give you further instruction on these and as well as other matters at the end of the case, but keep in mind that you may consider both direct and circumstantial evidence in reaching a verdict. It will be up to you to decide which witnesses to believe, which witnesses not to believe, and how much of any witness's testimony to accept or to reject. And I will give you some guidance for determining the credibility of witnesses at the end of the case. Now, there's some very important rules in a criminal case that I'm going to review with you now. First, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The indictment brought by the government against the defendant is only an accusation, nothing more. It is not proof of guilt or anything else. The defendants, therefore, start out with a clean slate. Second, the burden of proof is on the government until the very end of the case. The defendants have no burden to prove their innocence or to present any evidence or to testify. Since the defendants have the right to remain silent, the law prohibits you from arriving at your verdict by considering that any one defendant may not have testified. Third, The government must prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And I will give you further instructions on that point, but bear in mind, particularly those of you who have served in civil cases, that the burden of proof is different in a criminal case, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, than it may be in a civil case, which is by the preponderance of the evidence. Now, a few words about your conduct as jurors. First, I instruct you that during the trial, until you have heard all of the evidence and retire to the jury room to deliberate, you are not to discuss the case with anyone or among yourselves. If anyone should try to talk to you about the case, including a fellow juror, bring it to my attention promptly. There are good reasons for this ban on discussions, the most important being the need to keep an open mind throughout the presentation. I know that many of you use cell phones, smartphones, Blackberries, iPhones, iPads, and other portable electronic devices, such as laptops, netbooks, and other computers, both portables and fixed, and other tools of technology to access the Internet and to communicate with others. You must not talk to anyone about this case or use these tools to communicate electronically with anyone about the case. This includes your family and friends. You may not communicate orally with anyone about the case on your cell phone, your smartphone, or your portable or fixed computers or device of any kind, or use these devices to communicate electronically by messages or posting of any kind, including emails, instant messages, text or instant messages, such as Twitter, or through any blog, website, Internet chat room, or by way of any other social networking website or services, including Facebook, MySpace, and YouTube. These are, of course, extremely important instructions. And should anyone violate these instructions, it could have very serious consequences in terms of the outcome of this trial. So I'm going to be repeating this instruction to you because it's extraordinarily important. Of course, I've been here long enough to remember when you didn't need to have or give you these instructions. All we would say to you is don't do any research, which meant that don't go to the public library. But now we know that we have the library and our cell phones. So I'm confident that you will follow this instruction and will abide it strictly. It is extremely important. Now, it may be that a lawyer, a party, or a witness may pass you somewhere out on the street. If that happens, everybody is instructed that if you are recognized, they are not to approach you or to discuss any matters with you. So if you happen to see anyone in your regular occupations, and they do not, including me, and we do not acknowledge that we know you from the courtroom, that's purposely done so that we maintain not only the fact of impartiality, but the appearance of impartiality, so no one is going to be discussing any matters with you. Secondly, and also very important, do not read or listen to anything or related to this case that is not admitted into evidence. By that I mean if there is a newspaper article or radio or television report relating to this case, do not read the article or watch or listen to the report. There have been some coverage of this case, and there may be additional coverage of the case, so this is extremely important as well. In addition, do not try to do any independent research or investigation on your own relating to the case or this type of cases. Do not do research on the Internet, for example. You are to decide the case upon the evidence presented at trial. In other words, you should not consult dictionaries or reference materials, search the Internet, websites, blogs, or use any other electronic tools to obtain information about this case or to help you decide the case. Please do not try to find out information from any source outside the confines of this courtroom. Again, do not reach any conclusion or opinions on the government's theory of the case or the defenses or the defendants until all of the evidence is in. Keep an open mind until you start your deliberations at the close of the case. Now, you have been given a pad and a pen to take notes if you want to take notes. However, it is difficult to take detailed notes and pay attention to what the witnesses are saying at the same time. So, if you do take notes, be sure that your note-taking does not interfere with your listening to and considering all of the evidence. Also, if you do take notes, do not discuss them with anyone before you begin your deliberations. Do not take your notes with you during the break or at the end of the proceedings. Leave them here on top of your chair, and they'll be safeguarded for you. At the conclusion of the trial, we will collect all of the notes, and the notes will be destroyed, so there will be no permanent record of those notes. On the other hand, if you choose not to take notes, remember that it is your individual responsibility to listen carefully to the evidence. You cannot give this responsibility to someone who is taking notes, and we depend on the judgment of all the members of the jury for that purpose. The trial will now begin. First, the government will make an opening statement, which is simply an outline to help you understand the evidence as it comes in. Next, each of the defendant's attorneys will make an opening statement. Remember, opening statements are neither evidence nor arguments. They're simply the lawyer's views of what the evidence is going to show. It is often called a roadmap. That is, before you begin a trip, you take a look at the map and you try to figure out where it is that you're going. And the lawyers are going to lay that out for you in their opening statements. Once the opening statements are concluded, the government will then present its witnesses, and counsel for the defendants may cross-examine them. Following the government case, the defendants may, if they wish to, present witnesses, and remember that the defendant has no duty or burden to present any witnesses or to present any evidence, but they have a right to if they wish to do so. If they do present witnesses and evidence, the government's lawyers may cross-examine those witnesses. After all the evidence is in, then the attorneys will be given an opportunity for a closing statement, and each lawyer for each of the parties will then summarize and interpret the evidence for you. After that, I will instruct you on the law, and it will be then and only then that you may begin to deliberate on your verdict. So those are my general instructions, and let me talk to you about what is going to happen today. We are going to have opening statements today. The government lawyers, as I indicated, will go first. And government counsel has requested 75 minutes in order to lay out their roadmap for the case. And I will give a 5-minute warning once you have reached 70 minutes, and 1 minute just before the 75 minutes are up, and counsel will be expected to comply with the 75-minute limitation. Then the defendants have agreed on how to divide up their time, and Mr. Jacobs will have the opportunity to speak first, and he will have 15 minutes, and likewise I will give him 5-minute warning and a final 1-minute warning for that purpose, and that will follow Mr. Sanawida, who will have 20 minutes. I hope that we'll be able to get this portion done before lunch. If we do, we will then take a 75-minute lunch break. And Mr. Vance has talked to you, or will talk to you, about the logistics of how that is going to be conducted. And we may adjust that as the trial goes on. Perhaps to a shorter break, we'll start with 75 minutes. So today will be dedicated, after we come back from lunch, we'll hear the opening statements from the balance of the defense counsel. And we'll see where we are at that point in terms of beginning to hear witnesses in this case. So, with that in mind, we are ready to begin. We're ready to begin to listen to the opening statements. So, by my watch is 5 minutes past 10. Mr. Hunt, please, or Mr. Labor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Everybody's making money, and I can't get mine. You can't get out of this situation. I'm going to have to hurt this guy. I got two effing gorillas. I'm going to effing chop them up. Those are the words of the defendant, Anthony Staino. You're going to hear those words in this case. Those are the words that Anthony Staino used when he told a loan shark debtor that he had to pay up. I got two effing gorillas, going to effing chop them up. Members of the jury, those words define what this case is about. Those words define who each of those defendants are. Those words were spoken by one person, Anthony Staino. But those words carried the weight and the power of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra, a criminal enterprise, a criminal organization, the mob, the mafia. When he said that, those words were backed up by that organization. Those words were backed up by that organization because each of those defendants agreed to associate with and participate in the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. Each one of them agreed to join a racketeering conspiracy. And that's what this case is about. You're going to learn that the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra has been in continuous existence for a number of decades. La Cosa Nostra is Italian. It simply means this thing of ours. You will learn that the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra has a long history of using violence and threats of violence to accomplish its illegal goals. And the illegal goal of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra is to make money through the commission of crime. And you will hear that the members and associates of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra exploited that reputation in the community for threats and violence. They exploited that reputation for violence to make money through the commission of crimes, loan sharking, gambling, extortion. They exploited that reputation to make money through fear and intimidation. When someone from the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra says, I got two effing gorillas, people pay up. And the government's evidence will show that that's how the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra operated. The government's evidence will show how that's how each one of these defendants agreed to conduct the affairs of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. Joseph Legambi, Joseph Massimino, Anthony Staino, George Borghese, Damian Canalicchio, Joseph Licata, Gary Battolini, each one of them agreed to associate and participate in the criminal affairs of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra crime family. They agreed to work together with each other and with other members and associates for for the common goal of making money through crime. Crime of loan sharking, gambling, extortion, and no-show union jobs. And they did that by exploiting the reputation of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. They did it through fear and intimidation. That's the conspiracy that they agreed to. You're also going to hear the words of the defendant, Gary Battolini. Gary Battolini was an associate of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra member. He made money by helping with sports bookmaking operations and collection of debts, gambling debts and high-interest debts. One of those gamblers got heavily into debt to the Philadelphia mob, and Mr. Battolini approached him to collect the debt. And the gambler said, I'll pay $1,000 a week to get my debt paid down. And Mr. Battolini said, that's right. You're going to pay $1,000 a week, because if you don't, you're going to see a side of me that you don't like. Because right now, I feel like putting a bullet in your head. The words of Gary Battolini, backed up by the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. Now, the evidence will not show that Gary Battolini put a bullet in anybody's head. What the evidence will show that he didn't have to. Nobody had to do that. In fact, the evidence will show that that's counterproductive to the illegal goals of this criminal organization. You hurt somebody, you draw attention from the law enforcement community. But more importantly, if you hurt somebody, you can't make money. Dead men don't make payments. But members of the jury, terrified men make payments. And that's how this organization operates. And that's how these defendants have been affairs of their criminal enterprise. Now, I've used that term a number of times, criminal enterprise. And the government is going to prove by evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family was a criminal enterprise. And that's really a simple concept. It's one you're familiar with. Let me explain it by using an analogy. Think of a sports team or a company, a corporation. Think of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles, it's a team, but it's composed of a lot of different members, and each of those members has a different job. There's the managers, the head coach, there's the players, there's the support personnel, different people doing different jobs. Has a leadership structure. The owner tells the coach what to do, the coach tells the assistant coach what to do, the players follow those directions. They have standard rules that they follow. They have procedures for carrying their business. But even though there's different people doing different things, they all agree to the common goal of playing football and winning football games. And there's another important characteristic of the team, the Eagles, or the corporation, IBM, for example. It has continuity. When the season is over, they play their last game. The team doesn't go away. They begin preparing for the next season. Same thing with a corporation, IBM. When they sell a computer, they don't stop functioning. When the head coach changes, the team continues to function. When the players change, the team continues to function. They continue to work together to pursue the common goal of playing football games. They don't decide to go out and play badminton because they have a new coach. The enterprise stays together. It continues to exist for the same purpose. And that's what the government's evidence will show about the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. There were changes in leadership. There were changes in membership. But the enterprise continued to exist for the same purpose, same common purpose, making money through the commission of crimes, exploiting the violent reputation of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra to make money through fear and intimidation. Now, government's evidence will show that the enterprise had a number of distinguishing characteristics, ways to identify it. It had a structure. It had a leadership structure. At the top of that leadership structure was the boss. time? The boss was the absolute ruler of the enterprise. He gave the orders to everybody else, and his orders had to be obeyed. He had the authority to make members. He had the authority to demote members. He literally has the power over life and death. You're going to hear the testimony of an individual named Louis Monticello. Louis Monticello was an associate of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. He pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy, and he agreed to testify against his former associates in the mob. And he's going to tell you why he agreed to cooperate. He agreed to cooperate when word got back to him that the boss was going to kill him because he had failed to show proper respect to another member of the organization. Members of the jury, the government's evidence will show Joseph Legambi was the acting boss of this crime family. Acting boss just means that he's in charge when the real boss, the former boss, is unavailable. And you'll hear in the evidence in this case that Joseph Merlino was the boss before Joseph Legambi took over. And he was in prison during the period of this conspiracy. So Joseph Legambi was the acting boss running the organization. The next level of structure of this organization is the underboss. The underboss is the second in command. He's the assistant coach. He helps the boss decide what to do and make sure the orders are carried out. The evidence in this case will show that during portions of this conspiracy, Joseph Massimino was the underboss of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra crime family. The next level of the organizational structure is the capo regimes, also known as captains or capos, crew leaders. That's the mid-management level of this organization. They supervise crews of associates and soldiers. They make sure the crimes are committed and basically keep everybody else in line. They carry out the orders from the boss. And you will hear the government's evidence in this case will prove that the defendant, Anthony Staino, was a capo of this organization. And Joseph Licata was a capo of this organization. And George Borghese was a capo of this organization. The next level of the structure of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra are the soldiers. These are made members. All these people, members of the jury, are made members. Made just means they're officially initiated, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Soldiers are made members who actually work on the street and supervise crews of associates and carry out the day-to-day criminal activities. They're workers. Workers are people who are deemed to be capable and trustworthy, capable of carrying out acts of violence and threats of violence. Trustworthy because they'll obey the orders and won't reveal any of the secrets of the organization to law enforcement. They're considered earners when they make money through crime, through running loan sharking and gambling and extortion rackets. Government's evidence will prove in this case that Damian Canalicchio was a soldier in the organization. You will hear that basically, and you will hear Damian Canalicchio admitted himself, his role was a collector. He helped collect loan shark debts, unlawful debts, gambling debts. And you'll hear him tell a story about a fellow named Stretch. Stretch was a guy who got into trouble with the mob and owed them money. And you will hear Damian Canalicchio in one of the recordings that you're going to hear in this case talk about how he beat Stretch up so many times, and whenever Stretch saw him coming, he would cower because he knew what was going to happen. That's the role of Damian Canalicchio in this organization. You also hear from a recording of an individual named Louis Beretta. Louis Beretta was a sports bookmaker for this organization, and he used Damian Canalicchio to help collect sports gambling debts. And you'll hear Louis Beretta tell a sports debtor who owed money, went to him and to collect the debt. And he said, Mr. Beretta said, I'm John. Mr. Canalicchio was standing next to me, pointed to him and said, he's capable of cracking. I'm John. Members of the jury, just like the other threats I quoted to you, that's exploiting the reputation to make money through crime, fear and intimidation. That was Damian Canalicchio's role in this organization. You'll see some other faces on that chart. Louis Fazzini, Gaten Lucibello, Martin Angelino. The evidence will show they were also soldiers in this organization. They were also members of the conspiracy. They're not on trial here today, but you will hear about them in the evidence because you will hear their words, their recordings of their conversations, and you'll hear about what they did to promote this organization. Finally, the last level of the structure in this criminal enterprise are the associates. These associates are not made members. They're not formally initiated into membership, but they participate in the affairs of the criminal organization. They commit the loan sharking crimes, the gambling crimes, the extortion crimes. They're the earners. They make money. Gary Battolini, that defendant, evidence will prove he is an associate. As I mentioned, he's primarily a sports bookmaker and a debt collector. You will also hear about other associates who participated in this organization. Louis Beretta, a sports bookmaker. Robert Ranieri, he's Mr. Stano's right-hand man. Louis Monticello, he was also a sports bookmaker and a loan sharker. He's going to testify. You'll hear some Frank DiGiacomo, he's known as the Fixer. He was an associate of Mr. Monticello. He helped Mr. Monticello run the loan sharking and sports making business. And the last person there is Robert Verrecchia, Bootsy. He helped Joseph Massimino run a gambling operation at a place called Lou's Crab Bar in Philadelphia. Members of the jury, that's the structure. That's how the enterprise exists. That's the leadership management. That's the leadership and management team for this organization. And just take a look at it. You'll notice one thing. It's a pyramid. More people at the bottom, fewer people at the top. Keep that in mind. Now, I talked about made members. Question you may be wondering, how do you become a member of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family? Well, membership in the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family is by invitation only. You have to be proposed by another member. You have to be proposed by your capo, your captain. To be proposed, you have to be qualified. You're going to hear Joseph Licata talking about the qualifications for membership in the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. And you'll hear him say, we want people that we've known for years, people that have been in the family. We want quality, not quantity, quality. We don't want garbage. They want people who I mentioned before are capable of carrying out crimes. They want people who are earners, people who will earn money, and people who can be trusted, people who will be loyal to the organization. And how do they test that loyalty? They test that loyalty by the making ceremony. That's the initiation ritual by which you become a member of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. And you're going to hear that described in detail. And you're going to hear Mr. Licata talking about a making ceremony. The making ceremony is presided over by the boss. Other made members can be present. They sit in a circle around the boss. And it usually occurs in a secret place, in a room somewhere that police can't find out about, nobody else can find about. And the person who has been proposed by their capo is brought into the room. And when they're brought into the room, there's a gun and a knife sitting on the table. And the boss takes out a pin and he pricks the finger of the proposed member and draws some blood, puts it on a piece of paper, and puts the piece of paper in their hands and lights a match to it, and it burns. And the boss asks the proposed member, do you swear to use this gun and this knife to help your friends in the family? And of course the answer is yes. That ritual, that blood oath, shows the extent of the commitment of the membership in this organization. The gun and the knife, it shows the commitment to use violence and threats of violence to accomplish the illegal goals of this organization. And after you're made, after the ceremony is completed, the boss explains you to the rules of the organization, the secret rules of the organization. And once you become a member, membership has its privileges. You have an identity. It's like, when you're with the Philadelphia Eagles, you wear a jersey. People recognize you and identify your branding, who you are. When you're a made member in the criminal underworld, you have an identity as a member of the criminal enterprise. And that earns you respect. You're treated differently. And more importantly, members of the jury, when you become a member, you have the full backing and support of every other member in the organization. You get to supervise associates. You get to share in their money-making operations. And you will learn, members of the jury, it's a life membership. Once you're in, you're in. Once you become a member of this organization, you learn how to operate. You learn the identities of the other members. You learn what they do to commit crimes. So there's no part-time memberships. You can't come in for a year and decide to leave. Once you're in for life. That's the depth of that commitment when you take that blood oath. I mentioned you're going to hear Mr. Licata talk about a making ceremony. Here I'm talking about how he proposed his associate, Louis Fazzini. I'm sorry, this family is called the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family, but you will also hear that they had a crew in North Jersey. It was related, but it worked in North Jersey. Licata was the capo of the North Jersey crew. He proposed his associate, Fazzini, to be a member. And you'll hear how Mr. Fazzini was walked into a closed meat market, and he was sitting in the basement waiting to be called upstairs, in the room upstairs where Joseph Legambi and Joseph Licata were sitting. Joseph Legambi was the acting boss. You will hear Fazzini say, I was sitting there by myself. I didn't know if I was going to get straightened out or clipped. Straightened out is mob talk for being initiated, becoming made, going through the ceremony. Clipped means you're going to get killed. You're going to get shot. Think about that. The proposed member proposed by Mr. Licata, sitting in a room by himself, not knowing if he was going to be accepted for membership or killed. What do you think Mr. Fazzini did? He didn't run away. He went upstairs to that room and went through the ceremony and swore a blood oath of loyalty to the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. Members of the jury, that conversation that you're going to hear, and you will hear Fazzini and Licata thought that was the high point of their careers. In fact, you'll hear Fazzini say, it's kind of funny. Legambi pricked my finger, and he couldn't draw the blood. So he took the knife off the table and cut my finger. Blood got splashed over everybody. Mr. Fazzini was so proud of going through that ceremony, he got blood splashed on his shirt, and he said, I still have that shirt. That's the depth of the commitment to this criminal organization. That making ceremony by itself demonstrates the intent to join the racketeering conspiracy, to work with others, to commit crimes, to make money through the commission of crime. The agreement and the intent to join the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra, to make money by exploiting the reputation for violence. That's the structure of the organization. You're also going to learn that just like a team or a corporation has certain rules and protocols that they have to follow. Once you become made, you have to use the appropriate methods of introduction to other made members. You just can't go up to somebody and speak to somebody out of turn. A made member can only speak to another made member if they're introduced by a made member. And you will hear that that's done through a code word. Amico nostro. It's Italian for a friend of ours. When one made member says to another, he's a friend of ours, that means he's a made member. He's trusted. You can talk to him about your criminal activities. Another rule of this organization is the obligation to pay up and report. I mentioned a few months ago that structure is a pyramid, and that's what I was referring to. The people on the bottom, the associates, have to report their criminal activities to their supervisors, the soldiers, and the soldiers have to report what their crews are, what their associates are doing to the capo regimes, and the capo regimes have to report what they're doing, their criminal activity, to the boss and the underboss. And if they're making money on the street, loan sharking, gambling, extortion, they have to kick up a portion of their money. They have to pay up. The money flows up. The work's done at the bottom, the money flows up. That's called paying up or kicking up. You'll hear a recorded conversation in this in the evidence in this case where Mr. Canaliccio admits that he has to kick up. And you will also hear evidence how the FBI caught the members of this organization paying up. Now, one of the ways, you may be sitting here wondering, where is this evidence coming from? This is a lot of evidence. We're going to hear these people, in their own words, committing crime. Much of the evidence in this case comes from court-authorized wiretaps. The government applies for an order to listen in on private telephone conversations, and once that order is approved, the FBI can turn on a listening device and hear and record conversations. They did that in year 2006. They began wiretapping the telephone used by Damien Canaliccio. And in about March of 2006, they started intercepting conversations between Damien Canaliccio and Louis Beretta, the sports bookmaker. And they were talking about the bookmaking operation and money. Mr. Canaliccio happened to mention that he owed $300 to the boss, Joseph Legambi. He owed $300. Canaliccio was renovating a property, and you'll hear Mr. Legambi had a no-show union job at a company called Top Job Disposal. It was a waste disposal. So Legambi got a trash dumpster for Canaliccio to use in his renovation project, and Canaliccio owed Legambi $300. And during these telephone conversations, Canaliccio was talking to Beretta about paying the $300 to Legambi, and Beretta said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'll put an extra $300 in my weekly envelope to him. I'll give him what I have to give him, meaning money from the sports betting, and I'll put another $300 in and say it's from Damien. And you will hear a little bit later another conversation where Beretta reports back to Canaliccio and says, I did that. I put the money in an envelope, I gave it to Anthony, and Anthony said, yeah, I know what it's for, don't worry about it. Based on that wiretap information, the FBI, those conversations occurred on a Thursday. Based on those wiretap conversations, the FBI began conducting surveillance. They began observing Anthony Staino. They began observing him on Thursday mornings. And what they learned was Anthony Staino would get up, leave his residence in New Jersey, come to South Philadelphia, make a couple stops in South Philadelphia neighborhood, go to Louis Beretta's house, and then go to Legambi's house. They did that through March, April, May. They saw a pattern. They went to the court to get a search warrant, to search Mr. Staino. And that warrant was approved, and on Thursday, June 1st, they did more surveillance, and sure enough, Staino gets up, goes to South Philadelphia, makes a round of stops, goes to Beretta's house, and when he gets out of Beretta's house, he gets in his car and starts driving towards Legambi's house. The FBI stops him and executes the search warrant. And what do you think they found? You will hear the agents say that before they got to the car and were able to go in the car, they saw Anthony Staino throw something underneath the car. What do you think that was? It was an envelope with the word Anthony. You know what else they found on Staino that day? $8,000 in cash. That was the payout from Beretta and others to the boss. That's how the La Cosa Nostra family makes money through crime. You're going to hear another rule of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family is you have to support your fellow members when they go to jail. It's not surprising that a criminal organization that commits crimes, some of its members will occasionally find themselves in jail. One of the rules of this organization is you have to support them. If your capo goes to jail, you continue to run his criminal organizations, and you continue to send the money to him or his family. And you will hear from Louis Monticello explain that in rather explicit detail. Louis Monticello was a member of George Borghesi's crew. He ran sports bookmaking operations and loan sharking operations. George Borghese went to jail. Didn't stop the criminal activity, didn't stop Mr. Borghese's participation and association with the enterprise. Mr. Monticello continued to run the sports bookmaking, continued to run the loan sharking, and made payments from the money he was collecting to Mr. Borghese's family. And you will see from the prison records how often Mr. Monticello visited Borghese in prison during that time, and how much money was sent to Borghese during that time. That's one of the rules, to keep the family together. Even if you're in jail, you can continue to participate, you can continue to associate, and we will continue to take care of you. Another rule of this organization is the Code of Silence, Omerta, Italian for Code of Silence. That means you don't talk to law enforcement about our organization. You will hear that the penalty for Omerta can be death. And what does the organization think of people who violate that oath? You will hear in one of the recorded conversations, Legambi and Licata, referring to them as the effing rats. And you will also hear how the boss attempted to prevent law enforcement from obtaining evidence about this organization. Attempted to prevent law enforcement from obtaining evidence through the grand jury process. You hear about an incident involving Mark Scolari. Mark Scolari was a commercial photographer that works in Philadelphia. In September of 2009, he was hired to photograph Anthony Staino's wedding, and he did that. And he's a good photographer. He took very nice photographs. The FBI knew about that because they were also surveilling that wedding reception. It occurred at a hotel in Philadelphia. And the FBI knew that during that wedding reception, Joe Legambi, the acting boss, had Scolari take a photograph of his members and associates. He's standing right in the middle, and all his members and associates stand out behind him. Fairly typical. It's part of the brand. Remember I talked to you about the Philadelphia Eagles have a brand name? That's part of the brand, showing their solidarity, standing together. The FBI knew that Scolari took that photograph. So they sent a grand jury subpoena to Mr. Scolari and said, produce all the photographs of the Staino wedding. And they got a disc. These are the photographs. They put it in their computer and they said, guess what? Guess what wasn't in that disc? The group photograph. So the agents went and talked to Mr. Scolari and said, Mark, the grand jury subpoena said all the photographs, and we know you didn't send us all the photographs. What's going on here? And he told them. He told them that after he got the grand jury subpoena, Joe Legambi, the acting boss, paid him a visit. He put his arm around Mark. He said, do the right thing. Mr. Scolari knew what that meant. It meant try and hide the evidence from the grand jury. Unfortunately, Mark Scolari eventually did the right thing. When the FBI came back to him and talked to him a second time, he gave him that photograph. And you will see that photograph in the evidence in this case. That's just one incident of how this organization tries to protect itself, prevent detection from law enforcement. Members of the grand jury, you're going to hear that the LCN is actually a national organization. The Philadelphia family operates in the geographic region of southeastern Pennsylvania and central Jersey, northern Jersey. But there's La Cosa Nostra families in many other cities throughout the United States. They're in New York, Chicago, Miami. And that requires that the different families in the different geographical areas establish and maintain relationships. You have to know what they're doing. Because, first of all, they have mutual interests. They're all making money from crime. They may have overlap in some of their criminal affairs. And they also have to know who the members of the other crime family are. Remember I told you about the introductions? You just can't go up to somebody and say, are you with that family? You have to know who the leaders are and who the members are. Because you can't conduct business if you don't know who's a made member and who the boss of the other family is. And that those relationships not only promote the mutual interest of the crime families, prevents disputes. And it provides a mechanism for resolving disputes. Friction between different families, the families can meet among themselves and try and work things out. You're going to hear about one of those meetings in this case. You're going to hear about a meeting that occurred in May of 2010. Members of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family wanted to meet with members of the Gambino family in New York City. And Mr. Licata, on behalf of the Philadelphia family, approached a member of the Gambino family in New York to set up a meeting. That member was Nicholas Stefano. And they set up a meeting. And on May 19th, 2010, Joseph Legambi, the acting boss, Joseph Licata, a capo, Anthony Staino, a capo, and Louis Fazzini, a soldier, all went to a restaurant in Kenilworth, New Jersey, to meet with the leadership of the Gambino, New York Gambino crime family. And you will hear, they spent several hours wining and dining themselves, but they also spent several hours talking about La Cosa Nostra business. They talked about, first of all, they introduced each other. Mr. Legambi was introduced as the acting boss. Staino was introduced as a capo. Licata identified himself as a capo. They talked about the current status of other members. Merlino, he was in jail at the time, but he was about to get out. They were talking about what was going to happen when Merlino came home. They're talking about other associates and members, talking about the history of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family, past leaders and past criminal acts. They talked about making ceremonies and all sorts of mob business. They also talked about plans to recruit new members. Members of the jury, that meeting was essentially it was like the head coaches meeting for the Eagles or a board of directors meeting for a corporation. This was a board of directors meeting for the La Cosa Nostra families. You will learn that the reason for that meeting was that there was a beef. There was a dispute brewing between the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family and the Genovese La Cosa Nostra family in New York. Nicky Scarfo was the former boss of the Philadelphia family. He was in jail. He had his son initiated into the Genovese family in New York, and that offended the Philadelphia family. He was with the Philadelphia family. He shouldn't be associating or being initiated into the New York family. And there was also some tension about whether the Genovese family really recognized Legambi and Merlino as the leaders of the Philadelphia family. That's important mob business. That's how this organization conducts itself. And you're going to hear those conversations. Now, Mr. Stefanelli will not testify. He's deceased. But you will hear those conversations explained to you by another individual. That's Jacques Garcia. Jacques Garcia is a retired FBI agent. He spent 26 years in the FBI. Most of those years were spent working in an undercover capacity. 2 of those years, about 2.5 of those years, he was working in an undercover capacity as an associate of the Gambino crime family in New York. He saw how the La Cosa Nostra family works from the inside. He knows their rituals. He knows their procedures. He knows their language. He knows how they conduct their business. He will explain to you those conversations that occurred during that meeting, that luncheon meeting in New Jersey. And he will explain to you this was serious business. This just wasn't chit-chat. They had serious business to talk. And he will explain to you exactly what those conversations mean. Now, finally, members of the jury, the proof of the enterprise in this case will establish that the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family has continuity. It simply doesn't come together for a brief period of time to commit discrete crimes. It continues to exist over an extended period of time. The leaders may change, the boss may change, the membership may change, but the enterprise continues to exist. It continues to exist for the same purpose of making money through the commission of crimes. They follow the same rules. They follow the same procedures. They exploit the reputation to make money through fear and intimidation. When a new boss comes along, you don't have to turn in your membership card and get reinitiated. You're still a member. You just report to the new administration. You follow the rules. The organization continues to exist. And it's for the same reason that the Philadelphia Eagles recruit new players. They want to be able to put a field on the team next year. They want to be able to continue to make money through the commission of crime. And you'll hear Licata talking about that. You'll hear him at the end of that meeting at the restaurant in New Jersey propose a toast to all the good guys, here and away, all the good guys. His commitment, his affirmation to the conspiracy. A little bit later on, you'll hear Licata in a follow-up meeting when he was with Fazzini say, these are all my friends from 25 years. They're all my friends. And Fassini chirps in, who are we to change it? That's continuity, members of the jury. It doesn't change. They stay friends forever. Life membership. Past, present, and future. A racketeering enterprise. And that's what the government's evidence will prove. An association of individuals working together agreed that they will all work together to make money through the commission of crime. The conspiracy in this case extended from 1999 through 2011. We're going to hear a lot of criminal activity over that period, but it continued throughout that entire 10 or plus year time period. Now, we're going to prove a racketeering enterprise, but we're also going to prove a pattern of racketeering activity. Pattern of racketeering activity is, again, something that you're familiar with. Racketeering activity is just crimes. In this case, it's loan sharking, extortion, illegal gambling. Pattern just means they're all related. They're not discrete and separate crimes. They're all related. The evidence will show that all the crimes that were committed by these defendants were related. They're related by a common purpose, to make money for themselves through the commission of crime, through the exploitation of the mob's reputation for violence. Now, loan sharking. Loan sharking is the crime of making high-interest debts and collecting debts and sports debts through threats of violence and through intimidation. You're going to hear the testimony of several loan shark victims in this case who got into trouble with the mob because they borrowed money or they ran up sports debts and they couldn't pay them, and people came to them and said, pay up, and they threatened them. And they knew what that meant. Most of those people couldn't pay. That's why they got in trouble to begin with. That's why they borrowed loan shark debts. Many of those people went to the FBI and asked for help. They asked for protection. And they agreed to work with the FBI, and they recorded their conversations with these defendants when they tried to collect money and told them what would happen if they didn't pay up. For example, you're going to hear from Henry Scipione. Henry Scipione borrowed money from Anthony Staino and couldn't pay it back. Henry Scipione was the fellow who Staino said, I got two effing gorillas. I'm going to chop them up. When Staino went to the FBI and began recording his conversations, and that's how you're going to hear that conversation. But the FBI carried it a little further, just having Mr. Scipione there. They used Henry Scipione to introduce an undercover into this investigation. Henry Scipione introduced Dino to Anthony Staino. Dino was supposedly a corrupt businessman. He was a sports gambler who allegedly, Scipione said, you know that money that you lent me, I gave it to Dino, and he owes it to me, and so he really owes it to you. Dino also was posing that he ran a financial company that was trying to set up a money laundering business. So Dino began a relationship with Anthony Staino. Anthony Staino didn't know it at the time, but Dino was FBI Special Agent David Sebastiani. And David Sebastiani was recording his conversations. Over a period of months, he cultivated his relationship with Staino, and they got to the point, after Dino had made some of the payments on Scipione's debt, they got to the point where Anthony Staino trusted Dino enough that he decided to lend him some money too. Dino told Staino he needed some money to help get his money laundering business operation up and running. So Staino agreed to lend him $25,000. How do you think Dino got that $25,000? You will hear it, members of the jury. Robert Ranieri delivered the money to Dino. $25,000 in cash in a cereal box. Ranieri delivered it, but it came from Staino. We know that because the FBI took that cereal box and the liner and the money wrappers that the cash was in, sent it to the lab, in the FBI lab in Quantico, and took fingerprints. Staino's fingerprints are all over those money wrappers in the cereal box. Now, when Staino loaned that money to Dino, he told him what the terms were. The terms were, you got to pay me back $3,000 a month. You do the math, that's 144% interest rate for a $25,000 loan. He also made clear one other thing. If you don't pay me back, there's going to be trouble. You'll hear Stano tell Dino, I love you like a brother, but don't F with me. You know what's going to happen. I don't want to have to hurt you. Stano's words, backed by the power and strength of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. You're going to hear about Louis Monticello, how he ran a loan sharking operation for George Borghese. He set up a sports booking operation for Borghese. They were making money. He went to Borghese and said, let's start a loan sharking business. Borghese gave him the okay, and he put money on the street, and he collected it. And you'll hear Monticello collected that money through threats of violence. He would take his associate, Frank DiGiacomo, around and threaten people and beat them up. Monticello will tell you, he engaged in criminal acts of violence to promote the affairs of this organization. I'll tell you about one incident where they assaulted a rival gang member named Ray Sisto. Ray Sisto got into a fight with George Borghese. Borghese gave Monticello the order to go out, send him a message. So Monticello and some of the other associates got in a car and stalked Ray Sisto. They finally found him and walking down the street. They put ski masks on, jumped out of the car with baseball bats, and beat Ray Sisto. When Monticello reported back to Borghese what he had done, Borghese said, good work, good job. That's the loan sharking aspect of this pattern of racketeering activity. You're going to hear about several acts of extortion. Monticello will tell you about the Christmas tribute payments. In about December of 2000, he was summoned by Joe Legambi. Joe Legambi gave him a list of bookmakers, sports bookmakers. Legambi told Monticello, you go around to these people and tell them it's Christmas time, it's time to pay up. And Monticello, for a number of years, up through 2007, would go around at Christmas time and collect tribute payments from the bookmakers for the Philadelphia LCN family. You're also going to hear about from one of the bookmakers himself, who will say that, yes, I was approached by Gaten Lucibello. I had to make Christmas payments to Joseph Massimino, and I did. It's protection money. If you want to operate your illegal sports book, you got to pay tribute to the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. Now, in addition to loan sharking, you're also going to hear a lot of evidence about the illegal gambling operations that this family ran. And again, you're going to hear all the evidence you need to figure out what illegal gambling is. Some forms of gambling are legalized in some states, but that's not what this is about. These defendants engaged in illegal gambling. You're going to hear from another FBI expert, James Douglas Dunlap. He worked for 20 years or so in the Baltimore City Police Department in the Vice Squad. He did a lot of gambling investigations. He now works for the FBI. He's an expert. He analyzes records and other evidence, and he will explain to you what gambling is, what sports bookmaking is, what illegal video poker gambling is. And he will tell you gambling is really, again, it's a simple concept. It has three parts. Consideration, you got to make a bet. You pay to play. Chance, the outcome of the contest is entirely in chance. It doesn't depend on skill. You don't have to be smart or fast or strong to win. It's just the luck of the draw. You get the right cards, your team wins, it's a chance. And reward, if you win, you get paid. You get something back. That's what gambling is. Sports bookmaking is a business that accepts bets on sporting contests, pays winners, and collects from the losers. And he will explain to you that the sports bookmaking operation doesn't gamble itself. They just provide a service. You want to bet, we'll take your bet. The idea is you match each potential winning bet with each potential losing bet. So the losers pay the winners. The sports book operation takes 10% off that transaction. So every time there's a bet, they get 10% of the bet. Somebody bets $1,000, they get $100. It's like the casinos, members of the jury. The house always wins. Doesn't matter what the outcome of the contest is, the house always wins. Video poker the same way. You'll see these machines. We'll have one in court. You put $10 in the machine, you get credits, you play, you just push a button. Cards randomly come up. If you get a winning hand, you win. If you don't, you lose. At the end of your play, you tell the bartender where these are in bars and corner shops. You go to the bartender and say, I won 40 points. Goes to the cash register and pays you out. Illegal gambling run by you will hear the evidence showing that the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family ran sports books and also video poker stops. I mentioned Beretta. You'll hear a lot about his evidence. You'll hear about Peter Albo, how he got into debt placing bets with Beretta and Battaglini. He went to the FBI. He began recording his conversations. He was threatened because he owed the money and wasn't paying it back. Again, the FBI took advantage of that relationship to introduce another undercover agent into the operation. Albo introduced Vinny to Battellini and Beretta. Vinny was Special Agent Jay Stone. He was posing as a sports gambler. He paid off Albo's debt and began placing bets with Battellini and Beretta himself. Over a 4-month period in 2002, Vinny placed over $100,000 in bets with Beretta and Battellini. Now, the government didn't lose $100,000, but that's the volume of the bet. And remember, the sports book gets 10% on the volume of the bets. And you will hear from the recorded conversations that that sports book was run for the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. You'll hear Beretta tell Albo, I got to run this like a business. These guys want to get paid every Friday. And you'll hear Battellini tell Albo, Joe don't care about what goes on in the street. Joe doesn't care about anything. All Joe wants is his money. Joe is Joseph Legambi. The money from that operation, as demonstrated by what happened on June 1st, 2006, flows up the pyramid to the boss. Now, you also hear, I mentioned the Canaliccio wiretap, you'll hear that in 2006, Canaliccio spoke on a regular basis with Beretta. He helped him collect debts. He helped him settle up bets. You'll hear him in one conversation where he calls the gambler and says, you bet with my friend. You lost your bet, and now you're betting with someone else. Pay your effing debt, and then you can bet with anybody you want. That's Canaliccio's role in this sports bet-making operation. He's a collector. You're also going to hear a lot of evidence in this case about the video poker operation. You're going to hear from Kurt Arbitman. Kurt Arbitman also pled guilty to racketeering conspiracy. He agreed to testify against the other defendants in this case, and he will give you the insider's view of the illegal video poker gambling business. Arbitman owned a company named Ace Vending. Ace Vending sold machines, jukeboxes, and games and video games, serviced them and distributed them and took care of them in the city of Philadelphia. If you wanted a jukebox or a pool table, he would provide it for you. He'd maintain it, and he'd take the money out. He'd split the profits with you. Usually it's a 50-50. Sometimes it's 30-70, but the shop owner keeps some of the money, and Ace Vending keeps some of the money. Part of that Ace Vending business was a illegal video poker business. He would supply illegal video poker machines. He would service those machines, and he would split the illegal profits with the owners. Arbitman was introduced to Gaten Lucibello. Gaten Lucibello had a couple video machines, and Arbitman began servicing those machines for Lucibello. He knew who Lucibello was and what his association was. And a short time after that, Anthony Staino came to Arbitman and said, I got some machines too. Would you take care of them? Arbitman said, yeah, I'll help you. I'll take care of them. I'll service them. I'll make sure they operate. Arbitman wasn't getting paid for his work. It was a free association. They would reimburse him if he had to buy parts, but he basically provided free labor. And he will explain to you why. He knew who these people were. It was a benefit to Arbitman. He got to keep his own video poker business going. Nobody bothered him. He said, I avoided the aggravation. He also got the opportunity to go into other bars where the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family had their machines and ask them if they wanted to do business with him. Did they want to buy a pool table from him? So he knew what was going on. What he will tell you was going on, that each one of those stops that he was servicing for Anthony Staino and Joseph Massimino and Joseph Legambi were being used for illegal gambling purposes. And Legambi and Massimino and Staino knew that. And it's not just Kurt Arbitman. You're going to hear Legambi, Massimino, and Staino talking about that. Because in 2001, the FBI also got a wiretap on Staino's phone. And you're going to hear numerous conversations where Staino gives Arbitman directions about the video poker business. And again, based on that information from the wiretap, the FBI got search warrants, and in April 2001, they went out, and they were able to identify about 10 stops where illegal video poker machines were being used, and they seized the machines. And they also went to Arbitman's warehouse in Philadelphia and seized machines out of there. And you will see those machines, and you'll hear all about that seizure. That didn't stop the video poker business. Shortly after those FBI raids, Massimino and Staino and Legambi summoned Arbitman to Lou's Crab Bar and said, we're going to buy a new business. We want to know if you want to operate it. And they said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Same thing. Arbitman said, but I want you to make sure it's a regular business. I want you to get a license from the city of Philadelphia so it appears that you're a legitimate business. And I want you to have a checking account so I make sure you're paying taxes. Arbitman didn't want to get in trouble, but he knew what was going on. It was an illegal gambling operation. The new business that they created at Arbitman's request was called JMA Industries. J is for Joseph Legambi. M is for Mousy. That's the nickname for Joseph Massimino. A is for Anthony Staino. Arbitman continued to service that business, and they continued to operate it up until 2009. In 2009, it was somewhat deja vu. The state police did the same thing that the FBI had done. They put a wiretap on Kurt Arbitman's telephone. They identified all the stops, and they went out and searched them and seized machines. So continuity, 2001, 2009. The enterprise continues to operate. Arbitman will also tell you that he serviced video poker machines at Lou's Crab Bar for Joseph Massimino. He also serviced video poker machines at a place called First Ward Republican Club. That's a social club in Philadelphia. That's where Damian Canalicio hung out. And you will hear from the wiretap conversations how Damian Canalicio was involved in those video poker machines with Marty Angelino. Now, members of the jury, you're also going to hear from that evidence. I mentioned earlier that Massimino, Legambi, and Staino told Arbitman that they were going to buy a new video poker. That's not what happened. You're going to hear that after the FBI raided the La Cosa Nostra video stops and took those machines, they went to the owners of a company called M&P Vending. They were in the same business. They also had an illegal poker business as part of their operation. And Massimino and Staino and Legambi said, you're going to sell your video poker business to us. And they didn't want to sell their business. It was very profitable. It was a nice little business making money through illegal gambling. They said, well, can't we just make tribute payments? Legambi said, Staino took over the operation. They went around to each stop and changed the locks on the video poker machines. Those machines that belonged to M&P became JMA's business. And you will hear they didn't want to sell. The owners didn't want to sell. But they knew what would happen if they didn't sell. They were going to lose that business, whether they agreed to it or not. And they were concerned that if they didn't agree to it, not only would they lose their business, something worse could happen. They would know what happened to one of their relatives who was also in the business, who got assaulted when they refused to make payments. So that sale went through. They presented what happened was they found out that the FBI knew about this transaction because they were surveilling it. And in fact, the owners of M&P went to Massimino and Legambi and said, we've been contacted by the FBI. I think they know what's going on. So Massimino, Legambi, and Staino created an agreement of sale to make it look like it was a legitimate appearance. They even made payments. They made about $40,000 or $50,000 of payments to M&P to make it look like it was a legitimate sale. But it wasn't, members of the jury. It was a forced sale. It was extortion, taking money and property from people against their will by threats. Now, members of the jury, finally, you're going to hear about the no-show union job. You're going to hear from the conversations that that's a favored way of making money for LCN members, La Cosa Nostra members. What you do is you use your influence with a union, you get a job, you get a paycheck, and you get health benefits. But it's a no-show job because you don't have to show up. You don't have to punch the clock. It's free money. It's free benefits. It's theft from the union. And you will hear that Joseph Legambi used his position as the boss of this family to get a no-show union job with top job disposal. It was a Teamster organization. So he got free health care benefits from the Teamsters for 7 or 8 years. No work, no job, don't have to show up, but you get health care benefits. Over $225,000 in health care benefits went to Joseph Legambi and his family members for doing no work. It's a nice job if you can get it, and if you're the acting boss of the Philadelphia family, you can get it. Those are the crimes that you're going to hear about in this case. They're all related. Think about it. Gamblers start playing, they get into debt. They don't have money. What happens? La Cosa Nostra lends them the money. We'll give you the money. They can't pay the debt. What happens after that? Well, you got that business. Why don't you give us a piece of that business? Extortion. Gambling. Loan sharking. Extortion. All interconnected. All interrelated. These aren't isolated events. Same people, same participants, same victims, same underlying purpose. Make money for the members and associates of the organization through the commission of crimes. Now, finally, members of the jury, just a couple words about some of the evidence you're going to hear in this case. I mentioned a number of times, you're going to hear from people who themselves admitted committing crimes. They're criminals. Some of them are just petty criminals. Some of them are very serious criminals. And you may wonder, why would the government put that kind of person in the witness stand? And that's a fair question, and that's one you're going to have to evaluate when you go into that room to deliberate. But just two thoughts on that. Consider, how does the government prove the inner workings of a criminal organization most effectively? We talked about wiretaps. We talked about undercovers. People who know how the criminal enterprise operates are the people who were members themselves, who worked with it. And that's where their testimony comes from. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, members, you're going to hear a lot of evidence. Don't prejudge anyone simply because they take the stand and admitted committing a crime. Keep an open mind. Hear all the evidence. Now, I've been talking about racketeering conspiracy, and that's what the government's going to prove in this case. But there are other charges. There are separate charges of loan sharking and collecting unlawful debt and gambling. I believe there's 52 counts in this case. Each one of those separate crimes is also part of the racketeering conspiracy. So it's the same evidence. All the evidence on the racketeering conspiracy will prove those other crimes. Now, that's an overview of the government's case. That's a lot. That's why it's going to take a couple weeks to present that evidence. And on behalf of the prosecution team, I want to thank you in advance for your attention here today, and I know the attention that you're going to give this case. And just in case you forgot, I want to introduce the prosecution team. I'm Frank Laver. I'm the Assistant United States Attorney. I'm going to be presenting this case. John Hahn is employed by the Department of Justice in Washington. Suzanne Urkel is also an Assistant United States Attorney in Philadelphia. Mr. David Fritchie is also an Assistant United States Attorney. He's the chief of our unit. He's my boss. He'll be here off and on. He has other responsibilities, but if he's not here, don't think it's because he's not interested in this case. He just has other responsibilities, but he will be helping presenting some of this case. Now, members of the jury, Judge Rubino told you that the government has the burden of proof in this case, and the burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a very high burden, and we welcome that burden. That's why these agents spent 10 years gathering evidence. Wiretaps, undercover agents, cooperating witnesses, search warrants. That wasn't done to prove a couple gambling operations or a couple loan sharking transactions. That was done to present to you the full picture of this criminal enterprise, the association and the participation of these defendants in the criminal affairs of the criminal enterprise known as the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. Each one of them agreed to associate and participate in the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family. Each one of them agreed to join the conspiracy to make money through a pattern of racketeering activity, loan sharking, gambling, extortion, no-show union jobs. They agreed to make money for themselves and for each other through the commission of crime. They agreed to exploit the violent reputation of their predecessors, to use the brand name of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family to make money through fear and intimidation. That's what the evidence is going to prove in this case, and that's why, at the end of this case, the government is going to stand before you again and ask you to return a verdict of guilty. Guilty against each one of those defendants for every crime charged in the indictment. Thank you, members of the jury.
This concludes the government's opening statement. Mr. Jacobs, you want a brief break? Or?
I'd appreciate a comfort break, yes.
Okay. Let's take a recess then for 15 minutes, and we'll start at 11:25. Now, please be seated. During the break, I will remind you, please do not discuss the matter among yourselves or with anyone. Leave your notes here in the courtroom. During the break, you will be taken by Mr. Vance or Mr. Mikowski back to the jury room, and make yourself comfortable. And we like to try to start right on time, so it's 11:10, so we will start at 11:25, and then we'll sit until the next couple of closing statements are completed. So at this time, please proceed to the jury room. Ian. Okay, please be seated. We will now hear from defense counsel, beginning with Mr. Jacobs, who will have up to 50 minutes.
Thank you, Judge. May it please the court, opposing counsel, co-counsel, clients, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Ed Jacobs. I'm a lawyer. I represent Joe Legambi in this case. I'm going to be the first of the attorneys to address you, and I'm going to spend about half of my 25 minutes talking about one thing, and that is the first count of this indictment, which claims that we are guilty of some mafia racketeering conspiracy. I'll spend the other half of my time talking about everything else. You're looking at 7 innocent people. I'm not talking about the lawyers. I'm talking about the people charged here. You're looking at 7 innocent people who shouldn't be here. The only things you could say we're guilty of are these. 1, we live in South Philadelphia. 2, we're Italian Americans. And 3, we're rumored to be connected to the mob. And that's it. We didn't do any of the other stuff in this indictment. None of it. The fact that we're Italian Americans who live in South Philadelphia and rumored to be connected to the mob makes us targets. We're targets for law enforcement. They spent 13 years putting us under a microscope and came up with a gambling case. And we're targets for any lying criminal who wants to get off the hook by blaming things on us. We're not villains. We're victims in this case. Now let's talk about this first count of this indictment, that we're this big mafia, La Cosa Nostra, racketeering conspiracy. Count 1. That label doesn't fit this case by any stretch of anybody's imagination. Here's what this case is really about. This was an intensive 13-year investigation by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Police Organization, and the Pennsylvania State Police. What were they investigating? They were looking real hard to get evidence against the mob, also known as the mafia, also known as the LCN. In short, they were trying very hard to build a major organized crime racketeering case. The judge made mention of a roadmap as an opening statement. We have a roadmap in this case. We also have a world atlas. In 13 years, the proofs accumulated in this case include more than 15,000 face-to-face and telephone conversations intercepted and recorded, done through multiple wiretaps, through the use of tape recorders fastened to state troopers and FBI agents and fastened to the bodies of criminals who had gotten themselves in all kinds of trouble and are trying to work their way out at our expense. The witnesses in this case include more than a dozen cooperating witnesses, criminals in trouble, trying to get out of trouble at our expense. The documentary evidence in this case includes 40 search warrants executed over 13 years in 40 different locations. The law enforcement personnel in this case, questions 38 through 47 in the jury questionnaire, over 61 full-time law enforcement personnel involved in this case, all looking for evidence of Italian organized crime to make this big mafia racketeering conspiracy case. And what do we wind up with? What is the case really about? What are the specific charges? Bookmaking, accepting bets on sporting events, money lending, making informal loans at high interest rates, even higher than you pay on your credit card, believe it or not. If you look at the indictment, it adds up to about $30,000 spread over 13 years. What is that, $2,600 a year? We're on trial for the things in the indictment, and that's the loan sharking in the indictment, about $30,000. And a lot of this is among friends who loan each other money, sometimes at no interest and sometimes at an interest rate. Friends. And video poker machines, thousands exist in bars and social clubs all throughout Philadelphia, and they claim we had 20 or 30 of the thousands. And my client is charged with telling a photographer not to surrender a particular group photo, and he's charged with having a no-show job. Those are the real charges in this case. That would never make a single episode of The Sopranos. Those are the real charges. We have honest, good faith defenses to all these charges. Some of them are just plain false, bogus, baloney. Others are wildly exaggerated. But the federal government hasn't brought us to trial on those charges. They've taken a few molehills and they've made this mountain out of it, that this count one mafia racketeering conspiracy, because they got to validate this enormous expenditure of time and money at the state and federal level. So now you're going to have this scenario they're going to give you of this Italian organized racketeering conspiracy to give it some sex appeal. And they plan to give you a mini-series education on the history of the mafia in Philadelphia going back 4 or 5 decades, instead of just trying us for sports, gambling, video poker machines, and whatever else they say we did. Now, when you listen to these government witnesses, you'll think of this. You reach back far enough into the history of the mafia in Philadelphia, and sure, you're going to find examples of violence and mob wars and people getting shot and people getting killed. They're trying to tell you that we exploit that we exploit what happened before 1999 when this indictment starts. The term of this indictment doesn't start until 1999. They're going to tell you about some ancient history, some old news, and they're going to claim to pin it on us. Well, why is that? Here's the defense side of that story. After all these FBI agents and Pennsylvania State Police officers and 13 years of investigation and 15,000 intercepted telephone calls, there's no such evidence in this case. There's no evidence of people getting shot down. There's no evidence of people getting killed. There's no evidence of violence. This proves what the defense is saying. This is not a mafia racketeering conspiracy case. No one in this case is charged with a killing or a shooting. There's not even a gun involved or a knife involved. Nobody is charged with a beating in this case. The things that the government lawyers are telling you are about ancient history. The government witnesses will tell you that violence is the foundation of the mob. You have an indictment without a single act of physical violence charged in it. So if there's no foundation, there's no mob. The only people in this case that you're going to hear from, the only witnesses who are guilty of acts of violence, are the government witnesses. Monticello, DiGiacomo, Caprio, Milano, and perhaps others. The worst they found on us after 13 years under a microscope is a couple of angry conversations where people are making idle threats. I'm going to send some guerrillas, I should shoot you dead. Half the times they're talking about relatives, in-laws. 15,000 conversations. They can cobble together 6, 8, 10 of those in anger. One of them was spoken at a urinal. One guy's at a urinal, the other guy's at the next urinal, and he's saying in an offhanded way, this better not go bad, don't hurt you, if this goes bad, I have to hurt you. They're drunk at a urinal. The federal prosecutors have made a federal case out of this when it really shouldn't be. The truth in this case, and that's what we're after, the truth in this case, if there was any sports bookmaking, if there was any money lending, if there was any video poker violations, if there were, it had nothing to do with any big mafia, La Cosa Nostra racketeering conspiracy. They should have just charged a couple of guys with doing this and that. We'd all be out of here in a week. Now, counsel made this analogy. I'm going to deviate from my script because I want to follow up with this analogy about the Eagles. Here's how they think. Here's how the defense says they think. The Eagles is a football team, and it's been around for a long time. So what the government is saying to you, as I understood it, if the quarterback is taking bets on sporting events in 2002, and the right tackle and the left tackle are blending out money in 2005, and if the coach is running a video poker machine business, which is illegal in 2009, that makes the Eagles a racketeering conspiracy. That's what they're doing to us. That's how they've analyzed it, and that's what they're doing to us. Now, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by telling you that the mob, the mafia, La Cosa Nostra doesn't exist. Of course it does. In some form, it does. But it may surprise you to know this. It is not a crime to be associated with or a member of the mafia. You would never guess that from listening to the government lawyer who tells you about the knife and the blood and the oath and the this. Their own expert witness, Garcia, when he testifies, I will make him say that to you. It is not a crime to be a member of the mafia. In America, you can be a member of almost anything. It's not what you're a member of, it's what you do. That is not the charge in this case, just being a member of the mafia. They make it sound like that, but that's not the charge in this case because that's not a crime. The federal prosecutor's claim is that we are in a racketeering conspiracy, the object of which is to commit this wide array of criminal offenses. These are two different things, whether you are in the mafia and whether you are in a conspiracy to commit different offenses, and they conflate them. And the way they're presenting it to you, if you're in the mafia, then you're in this mafia conspiracy. Not true. Their own witness will tell you that. Now, the government's going to present at least 3 people to tell you about the mafia, because that's what they want you to hear about. Mafia, mafia, mafia. instead of these video poker claims and a no-show job. One is Peter Caprio, a gangster from North Jersey. Another is Gino Milano, gangster from Philadelphia. Another is this undercover FBI agent, Jack Garcia. And they're going to give you a good dose of what the mafia was like years ago. And remember, we're on trial for 1999 forward. Now, why? Like I said, they're going to bathe you in this melodrama because they can't show you, in this case, a claim of a gun or a knife or any act of violence. Nobody got his hair pulled in this case. So they want to make you think that we are members of this old La Cosa Nostra mafia group that did all these horrible, violent things. That's what this is all about. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to propagandize you against us, telling you about things that happened years ago, way before the time period relevant to this case. Now, I'm telling you, and of course this is not evidence, this is just my presentation of what the defense is all about here, why we're not wasting your time. I'm telling you the best proof that we are not what they claim we are is going to come out of the mouths of their own witness, and I'm going to be very specific here. They're going to produce this gangster, Pete Caprio, who's now got to be 80 years old or more. And Pete Caprio, North Jersey gangster, he's going to tell you that, you ever heard of the 5 New York crime families? Everybody agrees it's 5 New York. If you're in the law business, you know about 5 New York crime families. He's going to tell you the New York crime families, specifically the major ones, the Gambino family, the Genovese family, and the Lucchese family. They're the 3 big ones of the 5 New York crime families. Their own witness, one of their star witnesses, this major gangster who's a cooperating witness with them and has been for 10 years, is going to tell you that the New York crime families say that we're not gangsters. They say that we are not La Cosa Nostra, we are not mafia, we are not even made men. That's what their witness is going to tell you. I know that because I have his sworn testimony in New York, Newark, and Philadelphia saying that. Now, he's going to tell you that gangsters don't think we're gangsters. The mafia says we're not the mafia. It's only they that say we are. Tony Soprano or Don Corleone would laugh at us. But they're telling you that we are mafia people, and therefore we are this big mafia racketeering conspiracy. That's count 1. Footnote. This same witness, Peter Caprio, he's murdered 5 or 6 people. He got caught on tape planning to murder 5 more. He's a government witness. Guess what his penalty was for planning to murder 5 and murdering 5 or 6? Did 5 years in jail as a government witness. Plus they bought him a car, a Ford Taurus. Star government witness. So what we're saying loud and clear is, count 1, there was no racketeering conspiracy. There never was. They'll never be able to prove it. It didn't happen. Now, everything else in the case. The glare was preventing me from seeing that. Everything else in the case. The proofs in this case, the government proofs in this case, at their best, are completely unreliable. At their worst, are total fabrications. The federal prosecutors are building the bulk of their case on the most unreliable witnesses you could imagine. Arch criminals who have figured out how to get themselves out of all kinds of trouble and all kinds of debt. They decided the easy way to do that is run to the Pennsylvania State Police or the FBI and offer to become witnesses against people rumored to be connected to the mob, because that's what they're looking for. And these cooperating witnesses that you're going to hear from, they're not the least bit fearful. They go to the Pennsylvania State Police, they go to the FBI and say, hey, we'll tell you about Joe, we'll tell you about Mousy, we'll tell you about Scoop, we'll tell you about anybody you want, without any kind of fear. This is the very same group that these federal prosecutors are telling you is so dangerous and we have this reputation for violence with no trepidation. Petty criminals who get themselves in trouble, they'll blame anything on the mob because they know it's an easy way to get off the hook. People like us, thought to be associated with mob, thought to be connected, we're great scapegoats, great scapegoats. The strategy is simple. I admit what I did as a criminal. I claim the mob was involved. I get off scot-free. Very simple strategy. They make plea bargains. These are written agreements, contracts with the government. They enter into other agreements giving them payments. All the witnesses that you're going to hear from, the government witnesses, they've been induced to testify against our clients one of three ways. They have a cooperation agreement. One of them got $51,000 already. Or they have a plea agreement, which gives them what we call a 5K1 motion, a reduction motion, the opportunity to get no sentence at all, or a very small sentence. Caprio had one. 5-6 murders, 5 years in jail. Sounds about right. Or they get immunity. They get immunity, so they don't get short. They don't pay any penalty for anything they did. Those are the motivations behind every word coming out of the mouth of every one of the government witnesses. Every one of them. Here's some examples. This petty criminal, Frank DiGiacomo. He's a gambler, a loan shark, and a petty criminal. He ran up a $25,000 gambling debt with another criminal, Lou Monticello. $25,000. So you got two arch criminals. He decides he doesn't want to pay Monticello. So what does he do? He runs to the FBI and he offers his services, knowing that he can con them into paying his gambling debts, which they do. They're giving him money to go pay Monticello. And he knows they're going to forgive his crimes, which they do. They give him immunity from prosecution for all his gambling, for all his loan sharking, for anything else he did. So he becomes a star witness for them, and he wears a tape recorder against this guy Monticello. Now this is neat. In the first 2 months that he's recording Monticello, he catches Monticello in perjury. He catches Monticello coaching other witnesses how to go to the grand jury in Pennsylvania and lie to the grand jury. So he's a proven perjurer. Another couple months, he catches Monticello in a murder plot. This is a real criminal, this guy Monticello, because in less than 6 months on tape, they got him coaching people to commit perjury and planning a murder. They're got us under a microscope for 13 years. And what have they got? Some nasty talk. Some angry, nasty talk. Now, who was Monticello planning to murder? This goes right to the heart of everything I said about Count 1. Monticello, on tape, is telling DiGiacomo he wants to pay him $2,000 to kill Marty Angelina. Who's got this chart here? Thanks, Joe. Wants him to kill a mob guy. Here's Marty Angelina on this chart. Government says he's a major mob guy. Mob guy. This nothing wannabe gangster, petty criminal, according to the government's own witnesses, he's paying this other government witness $2,000 to go kill a mob guy. Does this make sense to you? This big, powerful mafia. And petty criminals are having them bumped off, taking out contracts on them. That's why the government is all wet on this mafia racketeering conspiracy theory of theirs. It proves the defense. Count 1 is nonsense. None of us are guilty, even close to guilty, of Count 1. So DiGiacomo takes the couple $1,000 and tells Monticello he's hiring thugs to go kill Marty. Then Monticello has second thoughts, don't kill him, just beat him up real bad. Beat him up real bad. So now, and these guys are lying left and right on these tapes, by the way. So DiGiacomo now reports back to Monticello, mission accomplished. We beat him up. His girlfriend was there. We beat her up. And by the way, I was talking to Anthony Staino, and he heard about it. He heard that Marty was beat within an inch of his life. In what mob could this happen? that some petty criminal has a major mobster beat up, another major mobster hears about it, and nobody does anything. And they don't even talk to each other, and nobody knows about it. It's preposterous. And Monticello is quite content with all this. What does this tell you about this government theory that we're this big mafia racketeering organization? 3 years before this indictment comes down, 3 years, this all happens. They don't, and nothing happens to Monticello. This big, according to them, we're trading on the violent history of the mob. Everybody's scared of us. For 3 years, this guy Monticello, who's paying $2,000 to have a man they say is one of our major mobsters beat up, nothing happens to him, not one phone call. Out of 15,000, not one phone call where anybody suggests lifting a finger against this guy, because this major mob story is just that. It's a story. The same witness, Monticello, he has told the FBI a story, and they have chosen to believe it. He claims that, now remember, this guy Monticello doesn't even claim to be a member of the mob. He doesn't claim to have been through this ceremony, stab your finger and swear this and that. This guy Monticello has told the FBI that he had an argument with my client, who they say is the head of the mob, or the acting head of the mob, over $5,500. And he made my client come to his house, and give him the money back. Would Tony Soprano give somebody money back if they had an argument over the dispute? This is so ridiculous, yet they're believing it. If this was the mafia, if he were the head of the mob, then would some petty gangster be able to call him over and say, give me this money back? I have a dispute, I want the money, and he gives it to him? These are the government witnesses, the stories they're going to tell you. Let's move off the admitted perjurer, who is Monticello, and let's move off to Giacomo, and let's talk for a couple minutes about government witness Henry Scipione. He's the one who's got the $50,000 contract with the government. He's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a con artist. He got fired from the post office for misconduct. He cheated the Pennsylvania lottery system. He's a degenerate gambler. Unfortunately, he was also a friend of Mr. Staino for half their lives. So what happened? He borrowed a lot of money from Mr. Staino, lying about why he needed it. And this went on for years. Then he ran to the FBI, and he told the FBI a different lie. Both what he stole Mr. Staino was a lie, and what he told the FBI was a lie. He tells the FBI he borrowed money from Mr. Staino claiming legitimate purposes. Then he told the FBI he borrowed the money from Mr. Staino so he could lend it out himself at high rates of interest. But he also told the FBI that was a lie. He's admitting lies left and right. What really happened is he got Anthony's money and he went and spent it and gambled it. That's what really happened. But the FBI takes advantage of all this, and they send these two undercover agents in. They give them money to give to Mr. Staino to satisfy this debt. They give money to Scipione to satisfy the debt. And the final result is Scipione is a clever shyster. He knows how to game the system, and he did. He borrowed all this money, he got it, he spent it, he gambled it, did whatever he did with it, and he's got the FBI paying it back at Mr. Staino's expense. Now, what do the federal prosecutors do with all these stories that they've gotten from Scipione, from DiGiacomo, Monticello? In the indictment, over a 20-month period, it is said that Scipione paid back $3,500 to Mr. Staino. They turned that into 22 counts of this 52-count indictment, $3,500. The other two arch criminals, DiGiacomo and Monticello, they were loan sharking together for years. Now, to get off the hook for the stuff they did, now they blame Mr. Borghese, saying he participated with us in $8,500 of our hundreds of thousands of dollars of loan sharping. $8,500 in a 3-month period while Mr. Borghese was confined in a jail under all kinds of surveillance, visual and audio. and there's not a shred of any kind of reliable proof that any of this happened. Monticello, according to the federal prosecutors he visited regularly, if you consider regularly 1 or 2 times in each calendar year, then that would be correct. Telephone contact, if you consider 1 or 2 calls in each calendar year, then that would be correct. Almost no contact between the two, no objective proof that any of this happened or that Mr. Borghese ever got a nickel. Yet they listen to the stories of these 2 arch criminals. They're unfazed. Another 13 counts of the indictment. 22 and 13, 35. I just explained 35 out of 52 counts. Now, the federal prosecutors are also charging us with having video poker machines. I bet a lot of you have seen them and maybe used them. Now, the specific claim is that Joe Legambi and Anthony Staino and Joe Massimino, a.k.a. Mousy, a very threatening mafia name. The claim here is that they somehow extorted, they put this right in the indictment, they extorted their way into a video poker machine business. Here's the truth. Of course, they never charged them with doing that. They just say that in the mafia story part of the indictment. The truth is, they bought 20 video poker stops, locations, bars, delicatessens, so on, from 2 men, Paul Drizal and Joe Procaccini. It was a business deal. We paid over $60,000, some of it in checks, some of it in cash, and we have receipts for the cash. That's part 1 to the defense on this video poker machine claim they're making against us. It's nonsense. Here's part 2. The FBI monitored this purchase, this transaction from day 1. They had wiretaps. They knew exactly what was going on. They listened in, and they debriefed the people selling to us, who are Joe Procaccini and Paul Drizal. And the people selling to us came back and said, guys, we don't want you to think we're doing anything behind your back. Do you know that the FBI came to us and they want to know everything about this transaction? They said, you know, and we're telling them everything? We don't want to look like we're doing something like that. They said, fine. There's not a blessed thing wrong with what we're doing. Tell them the FBI anything you want. So the FBI monitors the entire deal every step of the way. This happens in 2001, and they left us alone for 10 years. 10 years until somebody said, hey, you know, we got 13 years in this investigation, 15,000 intercepts, 61 people, 40 search warrants. We better charge somebody with something. That's part 2 of the defense. The FBI monitored the transaction and left us alone 10 years. Part 3, Mr. Drizal has gone to the grand jury and told the grand jury this was a business deal. They had their negotiator, we had our negotiator. I never felt threatened about anything. This was a business deal. And on top of all that, we live in this neighborhood. We told Mr. Drizal, we told Mr. Procaccini, Joe, Mousy, Tony, they know everybody at your stops. You got no contracts with these people. If we want to be SOBs, we'll go to each bar, each delicatessen, and we'll say, look, do business with us. We're starting a company. You don't know this guy Drizal. You don't know this guy Procaccini. You know us your whole life. Do business with us. We could have stolen every stop because we know all the people. Mr. Drizal even admitted that to the grand jury. We did the nice thing. We paid $3,000 a stop. I think it was $63,000 or $66,000. But they're still charging us because we have 20 or 30 out of thousands. Part 4 of the defense. Every single one of these machines has a tag on it which says for amusement only. Every single one. Now, pick any one of our stops. Any one. We have the same deal. We put the video poker machine in the bar. During the week, people play it. Let's say they play $200 worth in quarters and dollars, $200 worth. At the end of the week, we get a flat 30%, $60. The bar owner keeps 70%, $140. It's not this 50-50 stuff that the government lawyer is telling you. That's wrong. And the bar owners will tell you this. The bar owners keep $140, and they, the bar owners, decide what to do with it. We're not there. The bar owners decide, do they want to pay people who win on the machine or don't they? Some decided not to, some decided to. If they're paying winners, it could be viewed as gambling. But it's the bar owners who make that decision, not us. We never forced anybody to take one of our machines. We never told anybody whether they should pay or not pay. The bar owners decide. So, who do they charge? Not the bar owners, us. We have no decision-making in the gambling, but they charge us. They don't see that we're like any other vendor. Suppose it wasn't video poker machines. Suppose it was liquor. And if we're the vendor for the liquor, and the liquor costs $100, and we get $100, it's the bar owner who decides, should he overcharge for the liquor? Should he water down the liquor? Should he serve the liquor after hours? Should he serve the liquor to minors? Should he serve the liquor to people obviously drunk? Those are decisions made by the bar owner. They're pinning it on us. When the bar owner decides he's going to pay out, they're pinning it on us. And we had nothing to do with it. If we rented them a pool table, and we got 30% of the play on the pool table, we put in quarters and the balls come down, each rack fits in. If we got 30% of that, and people are gambling at the pool table, they're going to blame us for that too? That's the video poker stuff. They stretch the truth in this case to the breaking point. And I'm not making this up. You're going to hear these bar owners come in one after another, and they're going to back up everything I just told you. Everything. Now, counsel slipped. In the middle of his eloquent opening statement, he made mention of Mr. Legambi having a job at Top Job Disposal. He slipped. He told you the truth. He did have a job at Top Job Disposal. Later, he claims to you it wasn't a real job, it was a no-show job. Here's the truth. They're accusing Mr. Legambi, who's a married guy for 35 or 40 years, got 2 grown kids. He had this nice job at Top Job Disposal. It's about $52,000 a year. It's a trash company. He was friendly with one of the 2 owners, a fellow by the name of Mauro Goffredo, also known as Mario Goffredo, who died a few years ago. Joe's sister dated Mario years back. They're friends. When Mario died, Mario's son took over the business. And the son did not see eye to eye with the surviving partner. This happened a few years ago. One of their disagreements was whether Joe should have his job. And the surviving partner felt no. The son felt, yes, he should have his job. Now, the surviving partner doesn't like Joe. So when he talked to the FBI, he said, Joe doesn't do anything. I never see him. He never shows up. He's getting paid for nothing. And they lapped that right up. You know, the federal prosecutors and the FBI, they love that. No-show job. So they charge him with being a bogus employee. They should have checked. They should have checked. The truth is, Joe Legambi had that job as a salesman, and he produced the single biggest contract Top Job ever had in its existence. Over $17,000 per week in gross receipts, week after week after week for 10 years. He was their best producing salesman, and he got him other jobs also. And he was on site 4 or 5 times a month. And he has an employee identification card and everything else. And they're complaining about health benefits. $200,000 in health benefits paid to Joe and his kids and his wife over the span of 10 years. They're saying he shouldn't have got that. The Department of Labor investigator went to the grand jury and said every cent of that was a proper medical expense. There was no fraud involved. But they're charging him with this without looking at the paperwork and without talking to the right people. No-show job, because in their mafia mentality, you know, mafia guys get no-show jobs. Some of you are in business. Anybody comes to you and says, I'll get you a $17,000 a week customer. You'll pay them $52,000 a year. You'll pay them $1,000 a week. You'll give them a 2012 Corvette as a company car. Last, they're charging Mr. Legambi with obstruction of justice. This really sounds serious. Obstruction of justice. Here's why. Mr. Legambi, Mr. Stano, they're good friends. Mr. Stano got married a few years ago. Mr. Legambi hired the photographer, a guy he's dealt with before. The photographer goes to the wedding, takes 90 skillion pictures. After the wedding, the FBI goes to the photographer. They say, we want all the pictures, and we want this one group picture. The photographer, Mr. Legambi, they know each other. Joe is frankly offended that they want these wedding pictures. He doesn't think it's right. Reasonable people could disagree about this. He doesn't think it's right. Now, the prosecutor says that Joe said to him, do the right thing. Okay, that can mean a skillion things, but let's put that aside. What he didn't tell you is Joe was laughing when he said that. And the photographer even gave a statement saying Joe was laughing when he said it. The photographer leaves out a group photograph, thinks better of it, and a day or two later gives him the group photograph. That's the big obstruction of justice. They got the photograph a day late or 2 days late. What's in the photograph? According to the government, members and associates. How about a local lawyer? How about a local lawyer who's known some of the people in the wedding party his whole life? How about a medical assistant who worked for Jefferson Hospital doctors for years, who's known people in the medical and others? That's the group photograph, not members and associates. People at the wedding who've known each other, South Philadelphia, who know each other, enjoy each other's company, and want a picture. That's the big obstruction of justice in this case. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think I made my thoughts clear to you. There are two sides to this story. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. We're not the wrong side. We are asking you, we're imposing on your time, we're asking you to come here for quite a few weeks because we need to be clear to this. The whole time you're here, listening to evidence, looking at documents, listening to lawyers drone on, I know it gets wearing. I know it's not the most interesting stuff in the world. All I can do is ask you for your attention as best as you can give it, because every day that you're here, every single day, I guarantee you, there's nobody in the city of Philadelphia doing anything more important than you are. Thank you.
Mr. Senawida, you have 20 minutes.
May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good afternoon. It always seems that when I'm in a case with other lawyers, I always get to make a speech after somebody eloquently talks to the jury. But this case is not going to be decided on who makes the best speech or who asks the most questions. It's going to be decided on the evidence, and maybe more importantly, the lack of evidence that comes from the witness stand. Now, I know you're looking and you're saying, gee, we already heard 2 eloquent, long speeches, and we have 5 or 6 more. I'm not going to be as long as the other gentleman, and I'm going to try to be more case-specific as it applies to my client, Mr. Massimino. Promises, Promises was an old Broadway play. Matter of fact, I think it's being brought back on Broadway. The theme of which is that what you're told to expect sometimes doesn't come to fruition. So what you were told by the government in their opening statement might not come to fruition. For example, I want to start out by saying, here's the picture that they have of the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra. They have an acting boss, they have capital regimes, they have soldiers and associates. They have Mr. Massimino's picture, and you're going to see this, we're going to introduce it into evidence, and nothing, no title. They don't know what to make of him. He's no underboss. Nobody's going to take that witness stand and say he's an underboss. The only person who made him an underboss, I think, is sitting in the back row, Mr. George Anastasia from the Inquirer. The judge is going to tell you that this case involves 7 defendants, and you have to determine the evidence as to each individual defendant individually. So you're going to have to compartmentalize the evidence, how it applies to each defendant. The evidence, I think, is going to be different. Matter of fact, going by the opening statement of the government, I hardly heard anything alleged to Mr. Massimino. I'm getting way, way ahead of myself. My name is Joseph Santaguida. I do represent Mr. Massimino, affectionately known as Mousy. He's been known that since he's a kid. I like to think that the opening statement, there's 2 purposes to it. Number one, it gives us an opportunity to explain to the jury what we've done up until now. And then, like when you buy a book that has a cover that tells you what the book's about, it gives us an opportunity to explain to the jury what we think the evidence will show and not show as to our respective clients. What we've done is probably the most important part of the case. We selected you as the jury. And I'm going to go into it in more detail in my closing, but suffice it to say that your most important function as a citizen, you're going to be asked to make a determination as to a fellow peer, what happens to his future, how it affects him, how it affects his family. Is that deep? Absolutely. You swore to do it, and we thank you for that. How were you selected? Well, the judge gave you that questionnaire that you filled out, and the answers that you gave to those questions are in the form of promises. They're promises we're going to hold you to, because that's what we had to go by who we wanted on this jury. You all said, I'll keep an open mind. You know how important that is in a case like this? Because they keep on saying mafia, ooh, Italians, South Philly. Give me a break. They're human beings, and they're charged with certain crimes. Can they prove those crimes beyond a reasonable doubt? You know, like Mr. Jacobs told you about crime, count 1, the conspiracy. Well, according to this sheet, I see 1, 2, 5, 9, 15 people on here who are associates and members. So if one person commits a crime, everybody's responsible for that crime? I'm going to use the example given to you by the government, the Eagles. The Eagles have a field goal kicker. So if the tackle is making illicit loans, if the wide receiver is beating people up, does that make the field goal kicker guilty? I don't think so. You're going to keep an open mind because you're going to hear that Mr. Massimino was in custody during a lot of this time about crimes not related to this case. And you said you wouldn't hold that against him because that was one of the questions you were asked. Will you hold against a defendant crimes not associated here? You all said, I won't hold that against him. Good. Thank you. You also are going to hear foul language. Being in jail, being from South Philly, it's a little rough with a speech. And in South Philly, if you're 20 pounds overweight, somebody's going to call you a fat MF. So when you speak to somebody who's a little heavy, you say, you a fat MF, how you doing? Doesn't mean that you're going to hurt that person, or you don't like that person, or you're threatening that person. That's just the way you speak. There's some of the things that we said, that you said you wouldn't hold it. The fact that they're Italian, the fact that this is a mob-associated case. Is there a mob? Sure there is. Is Mr. Massimino an associate of that? Maybe. That's not a crime. You also said you're going to accept the law as the judge gives it to you. The presumption of innocence. That's so strong. The defendant stays there, and he's presumed to be innocent throughout the entire case. The government says, we accept that. They have no choice. That's the law. And the burden of proof in the criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. All these terms will be explained to you by the judge when he charges you as to the law when the case is over. And going by the opening of the government, I don't even know the specific allegations against Mr. Massimino. If you look at the indictment, he's charged with count one with everyone else, that he's responsible for what anybody else may have done. I don't know why. And he's also charged with some gambling counts. Well, I know that at one point, I think back in 2002 and 2003, a gentleman, Jack Buscemi, a gambler, a cheat, he got arrested like in 2007. So he got 5 years in jail. And then they asked him, you want to cut your time? Do you know anything? Well, he's a gambler. What's he know? He didn't know about drugs. He didn't know about bank robberies. All right, yeah. What do you know about the mob? Well, I know a couple times I paid them. I made a payment around Christmas time. Oh, a Christmas payment. Were you extorted? Not really. Did anybody threaten you if you don't pay? Something's going to happen to you? No. Why did you pay? I thought it was in my best interest. Sure, it's in your best interest. Because if you're associated with the mob and somebody bets with you and they lose, they're going to pay you a little faster than if you were a sole practitioner. Not because you threatened them. And is there any proof that that $5,000 was paid? No. Was it paid in front of someone else? Did the person wear a wire? No. Mr. Jacobs told you how anxious the government was to get a case against these fellas. Well, there was a bar, Lou's Crab Bar, that Mr. Massimino worked in. He worked in. He didn't own it. Anybody knows if you have a criminal record, you can't have a bar license. You can't have a liquor license. So he certainly didn't own the bar. He worked there. Anyway, in order to get some evidence against what's going on here, they had a pole outside, and they put a camera on that pole. So for 2 years or 3 years, whatever was going on in and out of that bar, they had it on camera. Now, there's not one photograph of this fellow who said he went in there a couple times to make these $5,000 payments going in or out of this bar. There's no corroboration. And there's no corroboration what was done with the $5,000. Was it in furtherance of the mob? No, because they made Mr. Buscemi ask him what happened to the money. See if it goes up to the top. Mr. Banksy said, I don't even keep it. I give it to the guys in jail on Christmas time. They're all in jail. They all want money like on their books. So I give it to them. I sent to all the guys. I must know 1 million people. So where's the crime furthering the conspiracy? Then at some point, Mr. Massimino does go to jail. And when he goes to jail, before he went to jail, he had lent some money to a person named Jerry Ayamuri, who was married to a woman that used to be married to a friend of Mr. Massimino. And he tells one of his friends, he said, if you see that Jerry, tell him to give you the money that he owes me. So everybody kept on telling Mr. Massimino, no, we see that. Nobody sees him. Nobody sees him. So now he's not dumb. He's been in jail. He is in jail. He knows that if you send a letter, that the people, the authorities are going to be able to read it. That if you get a letter, the authorities are going to be able to read it. So who would be dumb enough to put something incriminating in a letter? So what's he do? He sends a letter not to Jerry, but to somebody he thinks is going to see Jerry, Aaron Rosenberg. And he says to him, if you see that fat MF, tell him he can't run forever. No, he's not going to Guam. He lives in South Philly. Sooner or later, somebody's going to run into him. It's not a threat. And that person's not going to come in here and say he was threatened. That person's not going to come in here and say that the money that was lent to him was given to him at a useless rate of interest. Absolutely not. Nobody's going to take the stand and say that he put one finger on them or he threatened anyone. When you hear all the evidence in this case, you're going to scratch your head and say, Joey, what are you doing here? JMA. That's already been told you, and Mr. Jacobs did an excellent job explaining that whole scenario. What happened was Mr. Stainer was interested in going into the business, legitimate business. But he didn't know the two fellows who had those machines, Joseph Paracini and Mr. Drizel. So Mr. Massimino, who knows the whole world, was friendly with, I think, Procaccini's father-in-law and with the father of Drizel. And they said, you know those guys, go in there and talk to them. So he goes in and says, they'd like to buy these machines. Put a price on it. So they said, we'd rather just give you $3,000 a month. So that's no shakedown. Are you crazy? No, they want to buy them. Put a price on them, and they'll pay that price, and them legally. And you heard from Mr. Jacobs that the FBI knew about it and told Procaccini and Drizel, go along with this, because we know what they're doing. They're buying these machines. They were afraid that they were going to be considered rats if they didn't say something in advance. So they go and tell Mr. Stainer or Mr. Massimino, the FBI knows about this. They said, so what? We're not doing anything wrong. Go along with it. But you're also going to see there's not one scintilla of evidence that Mr. Massimino belonged to JMA. Why, if you're going to have a legal company, you have Joe, you have A for Anthony, why would M use Mousy? Why would you use your nickname? There's nothing. If they call the accountant, you'll see that there's nothing associating Mr. Massimino with JMA. He didn't get 1/4 out of that company. As a matter of fact, in this 12-year investigation, I don't know if he got any money at all from anyone, or he gave any money at all to anyone. Gambling. That's all. That's what the case is like a glorified gambling case. But are we involved in that? No. They're saying nobody went into this bar, Blues Crab Bar, and made a bet on a ball game with Mr. Massimino. Now, did they do it with somebody who was working in there? Yes, maybe. That doesn't mean that Mr. Massimino had anything to do with it. It wasn't his bar. And if the machines that were in there, first of all, they were probably in there legally, unless if there was a payment made, it was made by the owner or whoever had the machines. It wasn't Mr. Massimino because it wasn't his bar. So he's not involved in gambling. So he's not involved in gambling, and he's certainly not involved in count one. What don't they have? Well, you heard from Mr. Jacobs how many witnesses they have. I don't know, 60-something witnesses, law enforcement, people that committed crimes of their own, wiretaps, illegal wiretaps. I didn't hear anything of Mr. Massimino saying anything wrong in any wiretap. I don't see him commit any crime. What don't they have? They have conversation alleged from these higher-ups of the New York family and the Philadelphia family. That guy, Mr. Stefanelli, wore wire to. And you're going to hear probably the whole thing, 2 hours, whatever it was. Well, Mr. Massimino, why wasn't he invited? Supposed to be this underboss. Why wasn't he invited? Supposed to be a capo. Why wasn't he invited? If he was a member, why wasn't he invited?
5 minutes.
Well, the judge told me I have 5 minutes. And that's where I wanted it to go. I thank you for your attention. I'd like to think we're all here for one reason. The judge, the defense lawyers, even the prosecution, and certainly the jury. We're here to see that justice gets done. If they don't produce enough evidence to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Massimino is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, And if you stand up and say not guilty, that's how justice gets done. Thank you.
Okay, we have now concluded the morning session. We're going to take a recess for lunch, and we will resume at 1:45. So please leave your notes here in the courtroom. Do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone, and I'll see you at 1:45.
Do I get my 5 minutes back now? Would you ask him for me? Eddie only went 40 minutes. John.